Hello? Huh. Wait. Uh, yeah, me too. Oh, hello.
Chris McCon joined.
Hi, Lauren Hershon on the line.
Hi, Lauren.
How's it going?
It's going okay.
Hi.
A little busier. I thought I'd do that.
Hey guys, it's Sarah.
Hey,
Hi,
Sarah.
Hi, this is Matt from Nebraska.
So sorry about the dial-in mishap. I'm so glad you guys let us know.
Not a problem. Glad to be here.
So I heard Matt and Lauren. Is anyone else on the line?
Kathy and Kurt.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NASCA's Post-Institute webinar. This is Sarah Rager, and I'm NASCA's Executive Director. And I want to thank you guys for spending time with us today. I also want to thank you for bearing with us with our very last-minute dial-in change. So thank you for navigating that with us and your patience as we sent out the correct information. We are really excited to be hosting this opportunity to re-explore the case studies that we released in September and spending some time together reflecting on what we learned at the 2019 Institute. It's hard to believe it was 3 months ago. I am in just a moment going to turn it over to Antonio to kick us off with our content overview. And first, a couple of very brief housekeeping remarks. We are recording this webinar, so it will be available for your colleagues who may not have been able to join us here today. And then Kayla, if you can go ahead and go to slide 3, please. And I also want to point out, if you haven't had a chance to pre-read the 2 case studies that we're going to provide an overview on, hopefully your confirmation email had a link to these. I do really highly encourage you to take a really good look at these if you haven't already. We worked really closely with the states of Nebraska and Minnesota to put these together this fall, and I think you'll find these to be incredibly helpful as we go through today's conversation to reflect and get a really deeper look at the information. So with no further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Antonio Oxley, who serves as our facilitator for the Institute and works with Harvard's Leadership for Networks World. So Antonio, I'll turn it over to you to kick things off.
Great, thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone to the NASCA Post-Institute webinar. Also on my end, it's hard to believe it's been 3 months since the Institute, and I imagine we've all been accomplishing a lot with our key takeaways and our action items. The goal for today's call is to look back a little bit about the theme of driving good government. We'll look at the 2 case studies that Sarah mentioned in Nebraska and Minnesota around what they were doing to activate good government. We'll also have some time for some Q&A with our case leads during today's call, and generally reactivate some of our thinking around lessons learned from the Institute. I'll give you a brief overview of what will happen today. We will go in a couple minutes here to Chris McCon from Guidehouse and David Joyce from Granger. They'll give some key takeaways from their perspective from our corporate partners. We'll then look at Nebraska Center of Operational Excellence with Matt Singh, and then we'll go to Curtis Yoakum from Minnesota to talk about the Office of Enterprise Sustainability. And then we'll look into some case updates as well as get, again, some Q&A from everyone on the line so that you can continue to learn from these great examples of activating good government. I want to take a moment, though, to step back and remind us of where we went in the process of learning from the Institute. We came into it with not only the committee looking to define what the theme and idea sets were going to be in the Institute, but also in the lead up to it, really trying to grapple with what is good government. Everyone from the committee said, hey, we want to really dig into the definition of good government. We have a lot of new people coming into state agencies, coming into the role of chief administrative officers and chief operating officers. What does it mean nowadays to say we want to drive good government? So we spent a lot of time thinking about that and trying to define that with you. As you came into the Institute, we had a whole session that opened up on that with some examples. And the definition that we came out of that session with was, good government is the relentless pursuit of public value by realizing improved capacity, increased effectiveness, and decreased cost in achieving the outcomes authorized in democratic policy. Now, again, that was a mouthful, and we were all, chuckling a little bit as we had that definition at the Institute, and working through actually each word of that in many ways. As we look back at that, this idea of public value is really tied to legitimacy in government. Much of our work throughout our career is going to be measured by, is the governmental organization, the institute that you're working for, legitimate in the eyes of the public? Do they see what their needs are reflected in the actions and the outcomes from your organization? So that requires you to not only become more effective at meeting the mission and the objectives of what the public wants from your particular state or agency, but also looking at how do we decrease the cost of delivering that. And that requires you to improve capacity overall. So what can you do internal to your organization and external with partners to do more for less, to get more out of your organization over time? And that leads to what we talked about at the Institute around building adaptive capacity. This ability for you all to look at what the future is bringing, what stakeholders and the public want from you, and say to yourselves, what do we have to do now to drive some innovation and to adapt for this future? And that leads us to some of the big innovations that we talked about throughout the entire Institute around driving good government. So that's the overall theme we had, and the rest of the Institute really worked into what does this look like from your peers across states. And then at the end of the Institute, we dug into the uptake and edge matrix, which is a framework that can help you plot out some of your innovations around how you optimize your enterprise, how you look at agility in your workforce, how you get more evidence-based organization really around data and analytics, and how you can look at citizen-centric service and really driving innovation there. So I encourage you after this webinar to log on to the NASCA site and read up about the public sector uptake and edge matrix and look at some of the cases there. So with that, I want to turn.
Antonio, this is Sarah. I forgot a very important announcement, if you wouldn't mind. I just want to welcome, for the first time, we are co-presenting this in conjunction with our Continuous Improvement Forum. So if you're joining us as a member of our Continuous Improvement Forum, welcome. You are in the right place. And the two case studies we're about to present tie very closely with some conversations going on in that forum. So welcome to those folks. And then also, if you could mute your line, please, during the call, it will help us considerably with background noise.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks everyone.
Thank you, Antonio. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank you everyone from the Continuous Improvement Forum. I think this will be right up your alley as we look at what the states are doing here to drive continuous improvement. Next, we're going to go to our corporate partners to get a bit of their sense of some of the takeaways. This is I think, really valuable not only at the Institute, but also for your work now and going forward, because our corporate partners generally have a national view, or if not international view, on some of the innovations taking place. And so when they're at the Institute, they can reflect a bit to compare and contrast that to what's going on in the rest of the world. So we'll turn next to Chris McCann from Guidehouse. And Chris, maybe you can talk to us a bit about if you had any aha moments during the Institute or any interesting points of interest that you had and how you may have addressed those ideas throughout the Institute. Chris.
Sure, thank you. So one of the themes that resonated and that was consistent even between the Minnesota and Nebraska stories as we talked through them and applied them to different situations in different states, especially the states represented at my table, was this idea of change management and how that has gone from kind of a mysterious, maybe even throwaway phrase to something that public sector is quickly learning how to ask for and how to buy, and how you embed it into projects, big RFPs, big initiatives like building a center of excellence, or trying to build sustainability in Minnesota, and what goes into it, and where it's not as easy as just following steps 1, 2, and 3 or a linear process and you get adoption and you get technology or system users or process adherence or people all on the same page. That it is more of an art than a science, but that we do have to look at behavioral science to kind of get, look at what it's going to take to get people on board, whether that's a political push or a new system or new technology or a new thing you got to learn. And so we do that at Guidehouse a lot. We've got our national sort of center of excellence there, and we've authored a methodology. But we are putting it into our proposals and our work as something that's non-negotiable, and we're finding that our clients are not only tolerating that, but they're that's a differentiator for us. So I think that was something that it was good to kind of understand a little more detail how other states want that and are doing that internally or outsourcing it or both. And then since the Institute 3 months ago, we've actually won some transformation work in Oklahoma with the new governor and administration there to and we're bringing a lot of themes that we discussed at the table with those case studies and then in some of the sessions to enact meaningful change and really see our work through the citizens of Oklahoma that need better delivery in healthcare and transportation and education and other areas. So I think that for me was kind of the aha, is that this change management thing is not something that state government needs to learn. It's that they get it and they're doing it. So it was sort of an affirmation, but also an educational session for me and for my Guidehouse colleagues.
That's great, Chris. Thank you so much. It's interesting how you said art and science. I think one of the things that I reflected on at the Institute was with both Minnesota and Nebraska, how you look at these cases sometimes and you say, how did they really do it? There's all these maybe kind of technical things that they did, but there's also a lot of these leadership side, this adaptive side they worked on, and we'll get into that a bit when we talk with Matt and Curtis. But there is some art and science there, which I think is really fascinating around that change and how they sustain that over time. David, Joyce from Granger, did you have any aha moments or key takeaways? David, you might be on mute if you're there still. David has so many ahas and key takeaways that he's writing them all down right now. Sarah, you can maybe ping me if David rejoins us.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's move next into a bit of a debrief on these. And again, so many of us on the call were not at the Institute. So for you, this is a great opportunity to learn a bit about what Nebraska and Minnesota accomplished during their time. As Sarah mentioned, you can read the full cases on the NASCA website and really dig into what they accomplished in those particular innovations. And of course, one of the key benefits of being a member of NASCA is to be able to just reach out directly via the website or via email, and your peers are always open to talking about what they did to move this work forward. So let's go next to Matt Singh from Nebraska. Matt, maybe you can give us a bit of an overview on the Nebraska case for those that were not at the Institute. Talk a bit about what you guys accomplished and what you worked on, and then we'll go to Minnesota and then we'll go to Q&A.
Okay, yeah. First off, thanks everybody for letting me be here today. Can you guys hear me okay?
Sound good?
Sound great. Yep.
Okay. So our story really began when Governor Pete Ricketts took office in 2015. His vision for Nebraska was pretty simple. It was he wants to grow Nebraska. The mission was to create opportunity through more effective, more efficient, and customer-focused state government. A lot of different ways to do it. For us, there's 4 key areas that we focused on. First off, developing our people, making sure that we have the right training and opportunities to advance their skill sets. Also wanted to focus on the ease of doing business, cutting through the red tape, making it easier for businesses to come here, which creates jobs, keeping the right talent by attracting them and growing our cities. Number 3 would be managing our budget and cutting taxes. This is consistent with his recurring theme and his administration's theme towards responsible financial obligations. And number 4 was promoting Nebraska domestically and internationally. We're a big ag state, like many of the states listening, and he wanted to be proactive with going overseas and domestically to promote the products that we have to grow our economy. So that's where we come in, the Center of Operational Excellence. I'm the director and the master black belt. The goal is to run government more like business. The Center of Operational Excellence is based out of the Administrative Services, but it's also got a unique structure in that it's dotted line reports with process improvement practitioners in every code agency, of which there's 18 we work with. So it's a unique structure. It's never been done like this in the state before, at least not in Nebraska. When we were creating this, and a lot of this is in the case study, we had some questions we had to answer pretty early on. Things like, how do we staff this effort? Is it a full-time or is it part-time? How do we structure them in the enterprise? Is it one entity that goes out and helps everybody like a in-house consultant, or do we embed them in the agencies? How do we build that support, that change management piece, that social science piece? How do we get the buy-in, not just because they're told, but because they want to? How do we mobilize stakeholders from around the state to a common vision? And then how do we measure progress? Was also some early questions. So we did choose the belt system with Lean Six Sigma. There's a white belt for everybody, a yellow belt for middle managers, which really focuses on key performance indicators and simple problem-solving tools. Then we have a certified lean leader, which is an homage to Toyota production system and some of those pure lean concepts. Executive green belt for the executives, originally designed for the governor and the governor's office and his cabinet members, eventually ended up being adopted by C-level staff throughout the state. We do have full-time process improvement coordinators. They are green belts, and they work full-time on process redesign and special projects. Then we have black belts that work with me on enterprise-wide projects, a lot of projects that are difficult to do because they touch many agencies. The black belts work with me to work across agencies to get those done. So early on, we had a vision that we worked towards, and this evolves as we go forward. As we gain success, we tend to reassess where we're going. But the early vision was to implement the belts into all the organizations, solve organizational problems, lots of projects. As mentioned in the case study, this is the 3rd attempt at process improvement, and so we really had to show that it was going to work. We varied from the original tactical decisions pretty early on. Originally, we were going to do some outside entities coming in to train, and we decided to go in-house. And with that decision, we needed to prove that it was a legitimate decision. So we wanted to get a lot of projects, and we also wanted to get a lot of savings. We wanted a lot of verifiable hard savings and soft savings. So that was the early vision for us. We did have several wins early on, several big projects, a lot of special projects for the governor's office, hundreds and hundreds of dynamic process redesign projects. And our training really took hold, which really helped us from a cultural perspective. By the end of 2017, we had over 12,000 white belts, and that's that intro. We had over 2,000 yellow belts, which is those middle managers, 30 practitioners. We had just launched our executive green belt program, over 200 projects and over $17 million of verified savings. And for us, that's one of the key components of our program, is that verified savings. It took over a year of evolution of going from an industry norm ROI sheet we introduced. We worked with the budget office, probably about 30 different iterations to a point now where it's accepted by the budget office, accepted by the agencies, and accepted by the COE. Some of our early projects, we had a lot of them. State Patrol concealed handgun permit online renewal. We took a process that was very tedious and in person, and we got it online, saving approximately 10,000 hours per year. Construction storm water notices. Again, we took a process that was very laborious, very tedious. Only a couple of people in the entire state knew how to do it. Usually had to hire outside help to even walk you through it if you were a company. And we made it automated, streamlined, simple, and saving over $500,000 in the past 3 years. And several other, I don't know if you guys got to see the video or not, but we made a video, we put it out there about a project we did at Department of Transportation as well. So we had a lot of wins, a lot of successes, but we were not without our challenges. Again, because we were the third attempt, we had to prove this stuff worked, and we did. We had hundreds of projects, we had tens of thousands of dollars in savings. If you count cost avoidance, we had projects that were, $20 million in cost avoidance for the state. Just huge wins, but we did have some gaps. We did have some opportunities. One of those opportunities was the user experience for the cabinet members. We really drove results, but when we took a step back and looked at the user experience for the cabinet members, it wasn't always as good as it could be. So that's something that we are adjusting as we go forward. Also, we had a lot of activity. We had a lot of wins, and every one of these projects is worth doing. But something that we're working on is making sure that the project activity is in alignment with the long-term strategy of the agencies, so that it's not just activity for activity's sake, but it's activity that directly aligns with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-year goals of the agency. So those were some early opportunities. Some milestones, we had some big wins though too. Today we have over 400 projects that have been completed since our inception. Just under $50 million of verified savings, almost 4,000 yellow belts, 13,000 white belts. We're currently hiring another cohort of green belts. It'll put us at about 35, and we are over the 200 mark on the executive green belts. So a lot of huge wins for us too. So we've kept the momentum up, just pivoting a little bit to the left to make sure that we can meet everybody's needs. So the new vision we have, it's not radically different than the old, but I'd say it's adding to it, not changing it, is more the strategical alignment with the agency's goals. If we want to train, let's say, 200 yellow belts in Agency X, and we want to have 2 procurement coordinators, and we want to have 100 certified lean leaders, that's tens of thousands of dollars worth of training there for free. For the agencies, it's free. But we want to make sure we know exactly how that aligns with the goals of that cabinet member and with the governor. So some more strategic alignment. We want to make it user-friendly at all levels. We want to, our focus on sustainability across administrations has really led us to have an eye-opening moment saying, well, we can't just do this because we were told to. We have to truly win the hearts and the minds of the middle managers and the executives, because they're the future of where this program is going to be. And thank you to Michigan and Minnesota. If you guys are around here, I know Minnesota is. My Governor Ricketts sent me out there to touch base with them and learn what I could, because they both have enduring programs, and we hope to be another enduring program across several administrations. So thank you to them. And then the one thing that we really want to focus on for the future, it's definitely a part of where we're going, is that continual focus on improvement. It's easy to teach it, it's easy to say it, it's easy to do projects, but we want to live it, we want to breathe it. We've started doing more analytics around some of our decisions instead of just anecdotal data. We've started doing annual VOCs, random samples of hundreds of people across the state to see what they think about the program. We do focus groups in surveys with our cabinet members and executives to get feedback from them. And we want to continually adapt our program, letting go of what worked in the past if it means helping us get where we want to get in the future. So there's a lot more to it, and hopefully you guys have some good questions, but in a nutshell, that is the Nebraska Center of Operational Excellence.
Great, thank you, Matt. Fascinating case study. I thought one of the most interesting things about this was for you, when a governor, like in your case, Governor Ricketts, comes forward into office and says, and some especially coming from private sector, and says, hey, we need to run government like a business. It's very difficult then oftentimes to take the next step to say, well, what does that really mean? And so in government, oftentimes the policy side, the legislative side, is definitely a democratic process that says here's what type of outcomes we want from government, but that engine for those outcomes, the operations of government, can really be tuned up to become much more effective and efficient. And that's where this concept of running government like a business can really take hold when you look at what are the key structures and systems and processes, and how do we optimize those in order to get better outcomes over time, to get more capacity for outcomes. And this idea of again, of running government like a business can really take hold there. So that strategy you guys had to implement the running government like a business, plus the cultural changes, I thought were really profound, and that leads to the sustainability of that over time. So really great work. Similar in some ways to Minnesota and what Kurt Joachim will talk about. In Minnesota, also looking at how do we become more effective and efficient in operations, but also added in this layer of, and not only can we do that, but we can also drive some environmental sustainability as well. And that would be a great product, so to say, outcome of this increase in effectiveness and efficiency. So we're trying to get multiple goals at the same time. Kurt, tell us more about that and what you did in Minnesota for your case.
Hey, thanks, Antonio. And I also have Kathy Bile here, too, and she's going to be presenting with me. But thanks for the opportunity to speak today. And the case study did a great job of outlining this thing, really going in depth. So I'm going to try not to recreate that and to be brief. But one thing is, both what Matt and Antonio have alluded to is also the that importance of that executive sponsorship, that vision and sponsorship of an acknowledged leader. In this case, it was Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith, who's now United States Senator Tina Smith. But back in 2015, she basically issued the statement, which was also a marching order for all of us, which was, here in Minnesota, we're going to be a leader on sustainability because it's a moral imperative, it's financially smart, and Minnesotans expect it. But what was kind of behind that, and why did she even have to say that? You know, some of the issues that we were having in Minnesota is we've already had several statutory goals towards addressing climate change in Minnesota, and the state was not on track to achieve those. Kathy will go into this a little bit, but we had conflicting laws, responsibilities, goals, the haves and have-not agencies, and their ability or inability to really kind of make progress towards this. Another unique situation that we had in Minnesota, which was actually a positive opportunity, but kind of embarrassing in some ways from the state's perspective, is we have a very large Fortune 100 community in Minnesota, active corporate leaders who were already well ahead of the game as far as sustainable operations. And they saw both the public messaging side, but more importantly, they saw what this meant to their bottom line of streamlining their operations. Being sustainable also actually had some really positive financial impacts. However, the state was not in a good position to actually effectively partner with them or to really take their advice because our own house wasn't in order. We really needed to do something to bring 24 cabinet level agencies, not to mention a number of boards and commissions, all under the same page where they could effectively work together to make state operations a little bit more sustainable. Then another kind of key point here is we also had to tackle this in a way in which we could control the outcome. Legislatively in Minnesota, the dynamics at that time were such that nothing was really going to happen legislatively, but also we wanted to take ownership, meaning Governor Dayton, Lieutenant Governor Smith, they were really going to say, what can we make happen? What can we control? How do we control our own destiny in this? And so that was what really kind of went behind the process that we were starting. And so what we always do is we turn to our in-house CI superhero, Kathy Bile, which is what I'm going to do right now. And she's going to talk a little bit about the actual meat of the project. And then I'll kind of follow up where we are now.
Thank you, Kurt. I do have a cape at my desk. I fly in when needed. So when Lieutenant Governor Smith came to us, you know, the first thing we did, as we do on most projects, is look at the current state. And the current state was, and you've probably read this if you've read the case study, there were at least 14 statutes, rules, executive orders related to sustainability. There were at least 5 reports to which agencies were required to contribute some sort of data or information. And there were 6 different interagency groups. And it was complicated to say the least. And so we did various mapping out of things, as you'll see on the left side of the slide, to try and make sense of it, but also to try and visualize how it didn't make sense. And so that sort of spaghetti diagram, as we called it, turned out to be a good catalyst to say, no, this isn't a picture to help you see how it makes sense. It's a picture to show what the current situation is and what we want to fix. So the Lieutenant Governor was able to use that to say, we want to bring this all into alignment. And rather than trying to start with an order, you know, that quote isn't, I'm going to tell you what to do and exactly how to do it, and then struggle to implement that and convince everyone that they had to get on board. We ended with the order. We started with asking questions. And these projects are always involve a really delicate balance between too much demanding and talking, which can generate resentment and resistance, as I'm sure you all know, and just too much just listening, discussing round and round, which rarely leads to results. So we've always found that the best way to start a project is listening, and this was no different. So we listened to the agency stakeholders who were going to have to operationalize whatever we ended up deciding, and not just to learn their concerns, but to build trust that we truly did want to hear what they had to say. We go at this work not trying to change people or processes because we know best, because I don't, and I didn't in this case. I'm not an expert in sustainability activities, but we're trying to understand from people how to improve processes so that they work for everyone and help to achieve the goal. So agencies, understandably, had many concerns. They said, well, how are you going to ask us to meet all these new goals that they were afraid we were going to impose upon them when we don't know how to meet these goals? Our agencies are small. We don't have extra. Are you going to ask us to have extra staff? Or from big agencies, we're already doing all this. We don't need you telling us what to do or holding us back. And gradually, over time, in empathetically listening to these agencies, we reframed those conversations and turned them into agencies telling us what they wanted from the new structure. What they wanted from the new structure was support, particularly from those smaller agencies that weren't sure what to do. Larger agencies wanted to be able to share the experience, or those agencies who'd already gone forward. So we turned the concerns and frustrations of agencies back to them, asking them rather than telling them what would be helpful. So if we would have done this work differently, agency suspicion and frustration about a new structure being imposed on them could have derailed the work before it even got started. But in this case, that very strong vision from the Lieutenant Governor, very intentional listening that fostered and engaged concerns rather than just rejecting them, and then committed implementation that was responsive to those needs and concerns, we've created an enduring and effective structure. And it's now been 3 years, and we are seeing results in this structure. And I really want to highlight, it was interesting at the NASCA Institute, the extent to which some states were very interested in this story in terms of the sustainability piece of the story. Other states were very interested in the story in terms of the, how do I get all my agencies on board for something? We do think that this story is useful in both respects. If you want to learn more about sustainability, we have some things to tell you there, but we really put this forward as a case study, as an example of how you could help the state work together to achieve a goal, not the specific topic of the goal in this case. I'm going to hand it back to Kurt to talk a little bit about where we've gotten now.
And we'll just be real brief here. If you can just forward real quick. All of us, I think, that are on this phone call probably subscribe to the adage that if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And so after the new executive order was implemented and the Office of Enterprise Sustainability was established, we were holding our own feet to the fire, and we were holding all the agencies' feet to the fire. Started out in the first year with an annual report describing what we did and some of the progress that we did. And we did it in 6 key areas: fleet energy, water, solid waste, procurement, greenhouse gas. That's a static report that happened, that was issued once a year. And then Kathy, the next couple slides, are something that we're really proud of, and you can see the most updated information if you just go to mn.gov/admin. But we developed a sustainability reporting tool that we believe is pretty unique in the nation, whether it's either public or private sectors. But what our goal is to get into real-time data about what we're doing in those 6 areas, but it measures the cost avoided, but it does actually drill down at an enterprise level in each one of those categories, but each agency, each cabinet level agency in each one of those 6 categories, you can drill down into their data, and you can get pretty intense data, but it really gives the agencies and the enterprise a holistic view of all their different energy consumption areas, how they're doing, but it really gives them a chance to also make some changes. I mean, this is several million points of data that are going into this dashboard. But we also do believe that for the long-term kind of embedding into the culture of state operations sustainability, it's tools like this that are publicly holding us accountable, because there's very few public entities that pay as much attention to what Department of Admin does and what the state does as the environmental community. And if this site goes down, we do believe that there would actually be an awful lot of pushback from stakeholders outside of state government. So, and then the very last thing I'll do is, if we can skip to the very last slide, is kind of recapping what did we learn from this when we did our own debriefs, but setting a vision and having that executive sponsorship, in this case, the Lieutenant Governor, who was also affectionately known as the Velvet Hammer. So she was able to let folks kind of say their piece, but at the end of the day, if we needed somebody to say, this is what's going to happen, she was there to do that. Really to increase ownership and buy-in, listening to the stakeholders, and then figuring out that environment in which you can work, in which you can to some extent control the dynamics, and that was also key to making this successful. Actually, implementation rather than just talking about it, and then finally the importance of reporting results. Each one of these was critical to the success of this project, and I think to the long-term viability of this. So hopefully, Antonio, we stayed within the amount of time, and we gave an effective overview.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Kurt, and thank you, Kathy, for joining and giving us that overview. Just want to mention to everyone in the line, feel free to post some questions. If you went through Zoom, the Zoom link, and you're online that way, you can post your questions directly into the chat box on the right of the application. If you dialed in, you'll just kind of have to find an opening and come in audibly with your question that way. So while you're thinking of your questions, I'll start peppering Matt and Kurt and Kathy with some questions of my own, because we do want to look a little bit now at what's next. We've learned about the baseline of your case and what's happening now. Want to look a bit towards not only what's next, but also what we can take from your cases and inject into the 2020 Institute. We don't yet know what the theme is going to be for the Institute, but I can imagine that it'll be a blend of really, activating these innovations that we came up with during this past September's Institute, as well as sustaining them over time. And so one of the questions I think that I at least have for you and that others may have is around sustaining this progress. And both Nebraska and Minnesota, you've done a great job at embedding this change into the culture, and you're still working on that, it sounds like, but it's really getting supported in a way that's powerful. For example, with Kurt saying that, if you took the tally away, the numbers away with this website, that people might say, hey, wait a second, we want that there. As in contrasting to the beginning stages where they may have not seen that vision. So maybe we'll go to Matt first. And Matt, can you talk to us a bit about this? How do you you're going to sustain this over time? In the next administration, as well as are there things learned or things that you're still trying to figure out yourself that we should make sure we look at the 2020 Institute?
Yeah, I really want to thank Michigan. I got to go up to Michigan and Minnesota, and in the true spirit of data, I looked for recurring themes, much like you might do a voice of the customer interview or just looking at data for trends. And there were certain trends that were unexpected, but definitely gave us something to think about when we came back to think about, well, how do we do that? how can we be around for 20 plus years? One of them was to not hold too strongly to the methodology, not hold too strongly to the way we currently do it. And I think that was a little bit hard for us to digest because it kind of got us where we are. It was an uphill battle to get here. And we did a VOC survey to kind of check the hypothesis of what does everybody think about how we got here. And the key feedback was they like the belt system. They enjoy the methodology, but DMAIC in its true form is a bit rigid. And so we need to look at how do we widen the gate to let people use this in more applied situations. So one of the big things we're doing to focus on sustainability in 2020 is our practitioners are no longer just practicing process redesign, but they're also practicing special projects, data analytics, facilitation of important meetings, to really look at it from more of a continuous improvement perspective and not just a process improvement perspective. So that's huge for us. It's the first time in 4 years we've done it that way, but we hope to be better in alignment with the agencies and their actual goals and objectives, which leads to the next big take home of how do we, now that we can practice in a lot of different ways, how do we align all of our activity to what the governor and the cabinet members and the executives were already going to focus on? In the early days, it was very much about getting the energy, showing it works, repeat, do it again. Now we'd rather even take down the number of projects, but have them strategically aligned with adding value from the citizen's perspective, not just the internal customer, which we focused a lot on in the early years. So those are probably the two big take homes from us is widening the berth of how we do this, but then also making sure that it's all done for a reason in a specific direction to truly better the citizens of the state.
That's great, Matt. Maybe you could talk to us for a moment too about the, we have a question from Cindy Dixon around what the executive greenbelt looks like, the number of training hours and the project, but maybe you could also put that in the context of, I thought it was interesting how, you know, at the agency level, you had people working through the various belts, and then you had this executive green belt, which maybe if you were cynical says, hey, we're going to let some of these execs kind of take the easy way, right, and kind of learn about this process, but not go too deep into it. Is that cynic in me a little bit on, or is that executive green belt really robust in its training, and what does that look like?
To be totally honest, it is a little bit of both, but it's for a reason. So I personally have a lot of executive education experience with some of the local universities. And what the center of this program, what we really wanted to do from its inception was to not focus on education from a textbook perspective, but on an applied perspective. So if we had 300 green belts, but only 100 projects per year, successful projects per year, is that a success? Or would we rather have 20 process improvement coordinators, 20 green belts, doing the same number of projects, or maybe even twice as many projects? And for us, it all boiled down to what's the purpose of the training we're creating? We don't want belts for belt's sake. We don't want numbers for numbers' sake. We want a rhyme and reason behind it. And so the executive green belt was never a part of the overall vision. Around the time this was created, we had a budget shortfall, and the political powers that would be in Nebraska said, you know, we need to do something about this budgetary woe. And so that gave birth to the executive green belts of the intended audience is the governor's office and the cabinet members, but we found there's application to it to the C-level staff throughout the state. So knowing that that's our audience and we wanted to go through it, we understand they have extremely stressful schedules and, you know, 50, 60, 70-hour weeks. So we had to train them in a fashion that was appropriate for that level of executive, because it just wouldn't have been possible. So there's some truth to that. However, the functionality of it is it uses the Plan, Do, Check, Act, the Deming cycle. And its focus is how do we find hard savings? How do we not go through a process redesign, but 9 steps of Socratic logic of how do we identify the problem? What is some data to suggest either we are correct or not correct about the problem? What are our alternative decisions? So let's brainstorm through that. What options do we have? Let's make a solid decision based off of facts. Let's implement. And then let's go back and use more data to see whether or not it had the desired impact. So that can be crouched in a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different trainings. But for us, that's the executive greenbelt. So it is about 16 to 20 hours online training. Then they got to do 3 real-life exercises, including an actual executive decision, which with an actual return on investment sheet they got to submit. Attend a process map of a greenbelt. Attend some daily huddles of visual management. Then they have an oral exam with me, about a 30 to 40-minute oral exam where we review all their exercises and just kind of talk it out.
Great, thanks for that, Matt. And I imagine there's probably 2 really at least good other benefits to that executive greenbelt. One is I can imagine it gets the C-suite to find some alignment with what it really means at the agency level to move this work forward, so they understand what's happening and can better provide executive sponsorship of that. And 2, I imagine it really furthers the cultural aspect of this, right? If the C-suite, the governor, and the cabinet level are doing this work, that sends a strong signal to the rest of the agencies that, hey, this is real, and we're going to move forward with this. Would that be right?
Yeah, in fact, the governor buys individual belts for them and has them in the office, and it also provides a common vernacular to where in the past some of these conversations with the agencies in the budget office before the executive greenbelt could be very stressful. Now, since the budget office is executive greenbelt certified and the cabinet members are executive greenbelt certified, it's become literally the vernacular of how do we talk through the real issues we're trying to get to. So it's given a commonality across the state in departments and agencies that never used to speak the same language.
Great, thanks, Matt. Let's turn next to Minnesota, again in the context of where things go next with the Office of Sustainability there, and what perhaps are you guys thinking about or need to learn at the 2020 Institute to make this sustainable? We'll connect that to a question that came in from Samuel from Wisconsin, who's wondering, based on the information on the sustainability.mn.gov site, it looks like perhaps some of the agency outcomes have actually gotten worse over time. And did you experience any challenges in getting agencies to report any negative data? And what happens when an agency fails to make progress on a goal? So those are some really interesting questions, I think, from Samuel, and connects as well to the sustainability of this. So Kurt and Kathy, any ideas on that?
Thanks. And one, I just want to first dovetail back to a point Matt just made about getting everybody to do that executive greenbelt, creating that sense of common vernacular. That does give us a sense of common mission. And I think that's very similar here. The idea that we're all tracking the same, providing the same data points and tracking towards the same big picture ideas, because it takes 24 very, very diverse agencies and really puts them on the same page working towards a goal. So 1, that allows us to translate the data. 2, it gets everybody the same sense of shared mission. And that, I don't think, the importance of that can't be stressed enough. And then Samuel, I appreciate your question very much. First of all, being our neighbor to the east, you remember how brutal last winter was. That was a very particularly bad winter. And that impacted all our agencies. Fleet consumption, fleet usage, fuel consumption, those skyrocketed last year because it was a much longer winter, a much harsher winter, some really brutal colds. That did have an impact. So one of the dangers of 1 year's worth of data, basically, or a year and a half worth of data, so hopefully over the course of time, kind of the highs and lows of varying weather patterns will be kind of smoothed out. But that's a very good question, and it was a concern that we did have. However, I think that the only thing worse than reporting negative data was not reporting any data. Because if you were an agency and you were not reporting data on a very public website or towards the report that was going to the governor and lieutenant governor, that really was sending a strong signal that you were not taking their executive order and their directives, something that they were passionate about, and the current administration is also seriously. And so really there was pushback and exactly how data was being interpreted and how that was being worked. That's the normal negotiation of state government. And so that part was to be expected and that part happens. But going back to my earlier point of the importance of the executive sponsorship and message coming out at the highest levels, that played a big role. And so at the end of the day, it wasn't hard to get folks to report. It was a challenge to get them to figure out how to go about reporting and how to get the data points. And our folks from Office of Enterprise Sustainability were literally over at agencies helping them go through meters and going through power bills, energy bills, and all that different type of stuff in order to create, as Matt phrased, that common vernacular and get us all on the same page on the same data. But I think right at the moment, to Samuel's last question about when an agency fails to make progress on a goal, I think that the data is too new at this point to say that agencies aren't taking this seriously. But our folks are our Office of Enterprise Sustainability, they're really facilitators and in-house advice givers. So they're not really holding the stick as much as they're actually out at the agencies kind of with the carrots trying to figure out how to help them and put them in a spot. But to Antonio's question about what are we doing next or what are we moving forward with, part of that is to help the agencies. We're putting a number of master contracts into place. We're putting master contracts into small scale solar installation. So smaller offices or smaller kind of outposts around the state can figure out how to easily, they won't have to navigate the state's procurement process in order to put in a solar installation or to get energy consultants to come out. The other things that we are looking at are, different types of types of funds that allow the agencies, kind of revolving funds to help the agencies be able to make the investments that will ultimately give them long-term cost savings, but they don't have the startup capital to do that. There's a number of different things like that we're looking at.
And I think I would just echo what was said at the beginning about change management and the importance of change management. It's funny, everybody says they want data and transparency and accountability, and they think that's all great until it has to do with them. And then suddenly there's a lot of issues with accountability and transparency and sharing data. So it's a muscle that needs to be exercised in terms of being willing to let go of your data and let other people see it. And it's scary. And sometimes that fear comes from a legitimate place because it's been used against you in the past. But what we try to do, and I think that the Office of Enterprise Sustainability, the governor's office, tries to make clear that, as Kurt said, the data is there so that we can identify centers of excellence, find out what they're doing right, so that we can find out where there are issues, where we're not where we want to be. How can we help to change that? Not how can we say, you agency, you're so bad, you're in trouble, but what can we do to make your buildings more efficient or reduce your fuel usage? But it's a journey. It's not always, it's sometimes that, you've got to pry the fingers off the data and just show that it's not going to result in, a commissioner losing their job. Sharing the data is the first step. It's not the end.
Great, thank you so much, Kathy and Kurt. I think that it was an excellent question from Samuel, but I think Samuel's real question was, are the Vikings going to beat the Packers on Monday?
Yeah,
and that's what really is behind this question. So you can post your over and unders on the chat room for that.
Yeah, I didn't ask that one because I just figured it was kind of predetermined.
Oh. We agree.
We have about 7 minutes left in the call. We'll have one more final question here to the case presenters, and then if there's anyone on the line that has a follow-up question, feel free to post that. But maybe again, with this look towards 2020 and the next institute for both our teams from Nebraska and Minnesota, how are you looking at ROI with these? In Minnesota, you're posting on the website with the savings. In Nebraska, you have some real savings you've made from efficiency gains in Nebraska there for the agencies. Anything around outcomes as far as like effectiveness or ROI that we're saying to the public? Here's where this is going in the future. Here's why this is important for you from a public value standpoint.
Yeah, in Nebraska, it's an interesting question. We went through the process of getting down almost to a science how we want to report the ROI, and it was very much a collaboration with the the budget office and the COE. Right now, we report the hard savings, also the soft savings, which is the freed up payroll capacity. And then we have some metrics at the practitioner level around lead time reduction. However, that's more for the executives, that's more for the practitioners. Something we're really focusing on this year is telling the story better, the currency of the story. So far as we have quarterly meetings where myself and the cabinet members individually sit with the governor, the governor's office, and we determine what their goals are for the year. Some more collaboration there. And one of the numbers that they commit to is the total number of stories that they're going to submit, with the understanding that these stories are going to be more on the external than the internal. So we still have those internal standards that we've historically had, but now we're getting better at choosing projects and telling a story externally. In addition, as that becomes the guiding force for us, is getting better at telling people who don't do this every day what we're doing. The budget office is now in dialogue with the Center of Operational Excellence around new ideas of reporting metrics that we've never explored before. So things like maybe we calculate the total amount of hours saved for the actual citizens versus just the state employees. Maybe that's a better story. We used to report cost avoidance for the very first year, and then that didn't go over too well because people didn't know what we were doing. So we were asked to not do that. And that's something that, especially with the advent of some of the other states how they report, is there value to that? I think we're open to discussing that again. So we are certainly not, we haven't reached the end yet of how we calculate ROI. I think we reached a milestone and a place we're comfortable with, and it's time to push the envelope, become uncomfortable again, and figure out how we can better report the true return on this investment here in Nebraska.
Great, thank you, Matt. Kurt and Kathy, same question, maybe in the next 60-second answer or so around the ROI and the citizen expectations and public value. What's next for you there?
I would say there's a few things. Obviously, as you brought up, we do publicize costs avoided, potential savings. We do have statutory and executive order climate goals that we are expected to meet as a state. How we're approaching that, this is helping us towards that, and we can actually show our measurable progress towards that. I think equally as important and somewhat, once again, being able to steal from what Matt had just said, though, this is a nice, effective message on behalf of Department of Administration and the broader state enterprise that sends a message to the public, but also sends a message to ourselves within the enterprise. The state is not on autopilot. We are constantly innovating. We are constantly finding a way to do things better, more efficiently, and return value to the citizens of Minnesota. And I think that message can't be underestimated. And finally, because of the work of both our CI team and the work of the Office of Enterprise Sustainability, we're also working with our kind of state budget office to help look at the budget as a whole and how do you put operational outcomes, effective measures on efficiency in government and what we're doing. I think we have a key seat at the table of helping develop those measures because of what we already have accomplished, whether it's Office of Enterprise Sustainability or the much longer term work of CI.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. I thought to kind of circle us back to the beginning of the call, both Nebraska and Minnesota are on a relentless pursuit. We've heard from Matt, and they're continuing to push the boundaries there to figure out what to do next, and as well in Minnesota with Kathy and Kurt on around what new things, what new measures, what new strategies they can use to keep moving forward. So this relentless pursuit of public value is really a key part of that definition of good government. And so we'll continue with this theme online, and for sure we're going to continue it at the 2020 NASCA Institute of Management Leadership. And I'd like to turn over to Sarah to talk to us a bit about where that is and the dates and what we need to do next to prepare. Sarah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Antonio. And I especially want to thank our colleagues from Minnesota and Nebraska and our corporate partners at Guidehouse and Granger for sharing today. It's fascinating. I've loved participating and listening to this at the Institute, and I feel like today I learned even more things about what's going on in those states. So thank you all once again for being such willing participants and sharing with your colleagues. I do want to note, if you enjoyed today's conversation and want to be a part of planning the 2020 Institute. That planning committee will get started here next month. So feel free to email me directly or contact headquarters, and we will get you signed up and participate. The planning crew for that meets monthly, basically from January through September. They do a once-a-month phone call, and they help select the case studies, help guide our executive sessions. It's a great way to get involved with NAFCA and get to know your peers and be a big part of developing case studies like the two that we heard about today. So I do want to also remind you guys to please save the date for NAFCA's upcoming events. In the springtime, we will be in Indianapolis at our spring conference. This is more of a topical conference where many of our corporate partners will be participating as speakers, and we'll do a deeper dive into some HR and workforce issues as well as some IT issues. So please save the date for that. Registration will open in February. And then our next institute, which was what we reflected on today, is in Sacramento. We just did a site visit for it a few weeks ago, and the location is wonderful. It's going to be a great event, October 7th through 9th in Sacramento. Thank you all once again. We've had a wonderful year with everyone, and we appreciate you all spending time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you all into 2020. All right. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.